Hello, welcome to the notes on lesson 4. So today we are going to be factoring trinomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c, but a, the number in front of the squared term, is not going to equal 1. It's going to be some other number. So before we begin that, let's go ahead and try these warm-up problems. Why don't you kids pause the video and try to do them. I will give you a hint. Always look for GCF first, okay? And it even says it in the directions, so make sure you look for the GCF. All right, so here are the answers you should have gotten. For A, there was no GCF, so it's just going to be your leading terms for each binomial are going to be x and x, because that's how you get x squared if you multiplied. And then the two numbers inside, this -6 and this -1, they have to multiply to be +6, and at the same time they have to add up to -7. For B, you factor out a 2 and you have x squared plus 6x minus 27. So these two numbers inside the parentheses have to add up to be 6, because you took out a 2, and then multiply to be -27. Do not forget the 2 in front. If you drop that 2, the answer is actually wrong, because if you were to multiply those binomials together, without that 2, you won't have what you started with. And remember, factoring, we are not changing the expression, we're just rewriting it. So again, instead of writing 20, I could write 2 times 10. That's in factored form. All right, and then for C, you took out a 3, and you would be left with 11x plus 30. Those would be your B value and then your C value. So to get 30 is 6 and 5. They multiply to be 30, add up to 11. So now we're going to get to the problems where A is not equal to 1, and those are a little bit more complicated. Now, you could do this 2 different ways. One of the ways is guessing and checking. So for example, this one wouldn't be too bad to guess and check, because the only way to get 2x squared is 2x and x. Those are your only options. Now, to get 6, we have a combination of 1s and 6s, right? So this could be a 1 and 6, this could be a 1 or 6, and 2s and 3s. And so then you have to think to yourself, where would you put the 2, where would you put the 3, so that they will add up when you do your outer and inner, the 2 and the 3, to add up to 7. So just by looking and thinking of these combinations, if I did it this way, with the 2 in the second binomial and the 3 in the first, if I was to FOIL this, first times first, 2x squared, outer plus 4x, inner plus 3x, and then last times last would be your plus 6. Notice that these two numbers do add up to be 7, so therefore we know that that's the correct way, in the correct order to do it. Any other combination, if I put 1s and 6s, or the 2 and 3 were swapped in the other parenthesis, you would not get 7x in the middle. So now I'm going to show you how to do this using what I call a T-chart. So again, I should have first checked and made sure that there was no GCF. There isn't a GCF between 2x squared, 7x, and 6. They have nothing in common. So now here's where I do a little T-chart. Here I want to put factors of A times C that are going to add up to B. So A is the number in front of your squared term. 2 times 6 is 12. And they have to add up to 7. So now, because my product is positive, 12 is positive, the only way I could get a positive number if I'm multiplying 2 is they both have to be positive or they both have to be negative. Because I want them to add up to +7, they're both going to be positive. Factors of 12 are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. So you are looking for the 2 that will add up to 7. 1 plus 12 is not 7. 2 plus 6 is not 7. 3 plus 4, ding, 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 winner, winner. Okay, when you find your two numbers, your second step is to split this middle term using these two numbers as your coefficients. It doesn't matter the order in which you write them. So when I rewrite this, my first term stays the same, 2x squared. Now I could write plus 3x plus 4x, or I could have flip-flopped those. It doesn't make a difference. And then plus 6. I will tell you that when we get to ones where one factor is positive and one's negative, I encourage you to always write the negative one first, so then you don't have to take out a negative GCF from the second two terms. but I'll remind you of that when we get there. Okay, so now that I do that, you group the first two and you group the second two terms together. Of these first two, you take out their GCF. So 2x squared plus 3x has an x in common. You are left with 2x plus 3. Plus, looking at these next two terms, what do they have in common? A 2. Bless you. Haha, just kidding. Okay, so you take out a 2 and you're left with 2x plus 3. All right, so we are almost done. We have almost rewritten this in factored form. At this point, what you should notice is your binomial in the first parenthesis and your binomial in the second parenthesis, they're the same. They have to be. If they're not the same, that means you did something incorrectly. You didn't factor it right. So that becomes your GCF. You take that out from the two terms. What's left over? From here we have an x, and from here we have a plus 2. So notice this is the exact same answer that I got in the beginning by guessing and checking. So guessing and checking will save you time because you don't have to go through this step-by-step process to factor, but this step-by-step process will always work. Okay, let's look at the second one here. So if I was to guess and check, I know it's got to be a 3n and n because that's the only way I'll get 3n squared. Now, my only factors of 5 are 1 and 5, so I just have to figure out, one's got to be a positive, one has to be a negative, and I have to figure out which parenthesis each of them would go into. Looking at this, I see that this is going to be plus 5, because my outer would be 3n times 5 is plus 15n, and then minus 1 here. Okay? And I'm done. Just by guessing and checking. If your leading coefficient, if this a value is a prime number, and if c is a prime number, it makes it a lot easier than if I had like 10x squared, because 10 could be written, there's lots of different factors of 10 or 12, you know? So once the number has a lot more factors, guessing and checking may take a little bit longer. All right, but let's do it with the t-chart way. So again, for the t-chart, I would take, let me just erase my markings here. I would take the first a times c, as long as it's written in standard form, negative 15 that add up to positive 14. Okay, my factors of 15 are 1 and 15, 3 and 5. I know one of them has to be negative because the product is negative. So at the same time, they have to add up to positive 14. So the one with the smaller absolute value, that's the one that would be negative. So this works, this does not. All right, once I find my two factors, those numbers are very, very important. I rewrite my trinomial. I split the middle term. Now, because I have a minus, I will always put the minus factor, the negative one, before the positive. All right, we're going to factor by grouping. Group the first two, group the second two. These two terms have an n in common. I'm left with 3n minus 1 inside the parentheses, plus these terms have a 5. That's their common factor. So I'm left with 3n minus 1. I do a quick peek to check and make sure that this term, or this binomial and that binomial, that they are the same, and they are. So my final answer is 3n minus 1. I pull that GCF out from both terms, so I take out a 3n minus 1. What am I left with? An n from the first term plus 5 from the second term. So notice that does match exactly what I had here. But it took me more time and more effort. Number 3. So here there's no GCF between 3x squared, 17x, and 10. Because the 3x is, my leading term is 3x, I know the only way to get that is 3x and x, and then 10, it could be a multitude of things. It could be 1 and 10, 2 and 5, and they have to add up to negative 17 in the middle. So this one might take a little bit more effort. If you do the chart, you're going to have factors of 30 that add up to negative 17. So now, my product is positive, my sum is negative. That means the factors have to both be negative. Negative 1 times negative 30 is 30, but that does not add up to negative 17. Negative 2 times negative 15, oh, that works. So those are my two factors. Split the middle term, rewrite it. Again, the order doesn't matter. So the first term stays as is. minus 2x minus 17, oops, just kidding, 15x plus 10. Notice I'm not changing this, I'm just rewriting it. And I found the two numbers, the two special numbers, the only ones that work, that add up to negative 17 here. I mean, there's different ways I could add up to negative 17. I could do negative 20 plus 3, but it can't just be random. It has to be these two specific numbers. All right, so now we factor by grouping. And what do these two have in common? An x. You're left with 3x minus 2. And now if this is a minus, I take out a minus as well. If it was a plus, I take out a plus. What do these two have in common? 5. And now you have to be careful because you took out a negative right here, right? This is a negative number, so that's going to change the signs of the terms inside. This is going to be 3x, this is going to be minus 2. And if you're kind of confused with that, distribute it. Even distribute it in your mind and see, would you be left with negative 15x plus 10? Yes, you would, so therefore that's the correct way. All right, so now we're done factoring. 3x minus 2 is the GCF that this and this have in common, both terms. You are left with x minus 5 once you take out that GCF. All right, I would like you to try number 4 on your own. I'll start you off. You're going to be doing factors of negative 36, because that's 4 times 9. Factors of negative 36 that add up to a positive 9. Go ahead and try those, and then check if your answer is correct. All right, so for number 4, you should have gotten 4a minus 3 times a plus 3. One thing I do want to mention is the order of these binomials doesn't matter. So if you had a plus 3 in front and then a 4a minus 3, that's totally fine. What does matter is that the signs are correct and that they're with the correct terms. So 4a has to be a minus 3, it cannot be a plus 3. If it was, if those two signs were flipped, you actually would not get a plus 9a, you would get a minus 9a if you were to FOIL that back out. Okay, so make sure if you did not get that, to ask your teacher in class. So these last two, the difference here is that when you begin it, there is a GCF that you could factor out. So notice for number 5, I have all even terms, which means I could take out a 2. And then I'd be left with 6n squared minus 7n minus 4. So this 2, I always tell my students to circle it and put it at the bottom, like you're going to have a binomial times a binomial. Don't forget that 2, because if your 2 goes away, if you forget to include it in your final answer, that's not correct then, because you wouldn't get 12n squared minus 14n minus 8 if you were to multiply it out. All right, so let's go ahead and make our little t-chart. We are looking for factors of negative 24 that at the same time will add up to negative 7. So because my product is negative, I know my factors have to be opposite signs. So one has to be positive, one has to be negative. So I like to just go through and like, okay, 1 and 24, the bigger absolute value would be negative. That does not add up to negative 7. 2 and negative 12, no. 3 and negative 8, nope. 4 and negative 6, nope. 5 doesn't go in there, 6 does go in there, and we kind of wrap around. So my final answer actually will not have that, because I can't factor the trinomial. That does not mean that this is prime. I was able to factor out a 2. However, what's left inside the parentheses, there's no combination. So that part would have been prime, but I did factor out a 2. Okay, last one, number 6. I'm going to start you off on this one, then you'll finish on your own. Notice we have an x cubed now. We haven't had a higher power of x other than 2. Our variable has only been up to 2. But notice every single term here has an x in it. So that means I could factor out an x. But now when I look at 20, 48, and 16, they also have a 4 in common. So I could take out a 4x. This will leave me with 5x squared minus 12x plus 4. Okay, so again, I don't want to forget this 4x. I like to circle it or make sure it's included in my final answer. So now, factors of positive 20 that are going to add up to negative 12, that means they're both going to be negative. Find what they are, split the middle term, and try this problem. So pause the video, finish this up, and then check your answer with mine at the end. Okay, you should have gotten 4x and then x minus 2, 5x minus 2 times 5x minus 2. Remember, you could guess and check, You could, because 5x squared, I know the leading first terms have to be x and 5x. There's no other way to multiply two terms and get 5x squared. So that makes it a little bit easier. And again, as always, if you have any questions, please ask your teacher. Thanks. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye.